Hello Animorphs fans and welcome back to the Animorphs universe. Today we're doing another AniLysis and it is on the tank ship. The tanker ship, the big ship from book 3. There was a puzzle. That's what you see on the screen now. And it was the only actual official depiction of the tank ship. It's very blurry and it's in the background, but it's this massive bugger off thing up in the mountains. We deal with it only in book 3, The Encounter. This book right here, I should have gotten it out previously, but there you go. And well, let's just cover it. Firstly, starting with the appearance as we usually do. Let's have a look at that. It was huge, but the word huge doesn't really begin to describe it. Have you ever seen a picture of an oil tanker? Or maybe an aircraft carrier? That's what I mean by huge. Compared to this thing, the biggest jumbo jet ever built was a toy. It was shaped like a manta ray. There was a bulging fat portion in the middle, with swooped curvy wings on either side. On top of the wings were huge scoops, like air intakes on a fighter jet, but much bigger. You could suck a fleet of buses in through those scoops. The only windows were in a small bulge at the top. The bridge, I realised. Focusing on it, I could see the shadowy shapes of taxons inside. Lila, please, I'm trying to read. But mostly that ship was just big. Really big. As in, it blocked out the sun. It was so big. Suddenly, out from behind the ship, a pair of bug fighters zipped into view. I landed on top of the hovering ship. I planted my talons on the hard, cold metal surface. It stretched in every direction around me. The surface curved down and away from me so that I couldn't even see the edge. The surface curved down and away from me so that I couldn't even see the edges. It was as if I was standing all alone on a metal moon. Sorry about the cat, by the way. She wants my attention for some reason, don't you? What do you want? Eh? You just want attention, don't you? You're a good kitty. That's the appearance. That's as much as we get from it. So it's just this vast manta ray shaped thing. I've got my pad thing here. So in a moment, I'll attempt to describe it via drawing. See how that goes. But before I do that, I just want to cover some of the capabilities and tools that this thing has, just to give us more of a picture, what we're looking at, see if that helps us picture this thing in our minds. So let's look at what this thing does, what its purpose is, as we discover from book 3, The Encounter. From the belly of the ship, a pipe began to lower into the water, then a second pipe, and a third. They're like straws, Cassie said. They're drinking. I could hear the sucking sounds. Thousands, maybe millions of gallons of water being sucked up into the ship. That's why it's so big, Marco said. He laughed. Well. What do you know? We've just discovered that the Yeerks have a great big weakness. A weakness? Rachel demanded. You can look at that ship and talk about weakness? But I understood what Marco meant. It means they need something, I said. Exactly, Marco said. Those big scoops on the side? I think those are for air. That's why they fly so far through the atmosphere when they come down. They're scooping up oxygen. And now they're sucking up water. It's a truck, Cassie cried. That whole huge ship is really just a truck. Yeah, I said. It carries air and water up to the Yeerk mothership in orbit. I guess they need Earth to supply them. The monstrous bulk of the ship was overhead, leaving only a few feet open above the surface of the water. I decided I had to chance it. I flew under the ship, skimmed the dappled water below and practically scraping the metal belly of the ship above me. I was a few thousand yards high, able to see my friends in the lake when I felt its presence again. I looked up. The invisible wave, the slight ripple in the fabric of the sky, it was there. It was moving slowly overhead, even more slowly than before. And then, as I watched, it was invisible no more. I soared high on a nice thermal pattern created by the ship itself. I rose high up and over the top of the ship. Those are the general capabilities that we find out about this ship. We don't learn much about what else goes on inside, but if it is just a big tanker, then there can't actually be that much, let's be honest. So I've got my little drawing thing up here. I've got my OBS running. So let's see what I can do here. It's been a while since I did this. What colour shall we go for? Everything else is green, so let's go for a nice darkish green. So it's shaped like a manta ray. So from above, it probably looks like... Gosh. So it's probably shaped a bit like this. So you've got the big chunky bit in the middle with the bridge there. So this is from the top view. So let's do like a front view as well. Sort of like this, I imagine. So we've got the wings here, and then it becomes that bit to the other side with the wings, and then here we've got like a windows on the top like that. Also, you've got these like big air intakes. I'm seeing like these big air intakes just on the wings here, and they look like airplane propeller, not the propellers, the engines. So they're like black with like grills and stuff. And then below, of course, you'll have like the pipes that come down from here. So I imagine this will be where the water is stored, in the bulky bit in the middle here. And I don't know, maybe let's just do air as like a burgundy colour. Like maybe air gets stored at the back like that. So if it comes in the wings... This is all speculation, by the way. This isn't like canon. It's not mentioned. But we do get a mention that when the animals get sucked up, as we'll go into the plot bit later on, as they get sucked up, they go into this vast chamber and there's like a grate at the top. So this bit here is probably where all the crew is, because there's the bridge, so it'll be that bit there. And then the grate is like up here at the top, so maybe like there. I don't know why, but maybe that's where the crew can sort of look in there and see what's going on. Let's do a side view as well, shall we? There's the bridge. The wings are like here, sort of, on either side, with the air intakes like there. So let's just make that obvious. The wind comes in here and sort of gets stored maybe like back here, whereas the water all comes into like this big bit here. So if the bridge is on the top, you got like the little Taxon crew in here. Say hello. How would they get out? So they're probably at the front here. So there's probably like an exit hatch like over here somewhere, so they can get up there. Because the rest of this, if it's anything like a British tanker like you see on the roads, you got the cab at the front, and then the back is just, that's just where you hold all the stuff. So if it's anything like that, then all this stuff here at the front is just your admin. And then it's all tanker at the back, basically. So that's what I'm picturing. That's what's going through my head as I'm looking at this thing. And it's massive, by the way. So this bridge is probably even smaller than that. It's just exaggerated for the purposes of this picture. It is just like a big, massive shell that holds all this water. So yeah, that's what I think. It does make you wonder how much water they can take in. So the pipes we saw for that last quote, you know, it gets like right on top of the lake, because Tobias is skimming. Tobias is here, and he skims underneath. So there's water like right here. That's the lake, and there's the little fishy. That's Jake. So they have to get sucked up into there. This is all in the plot, by the way. We will cover this. It's like 2-3 feet from the water, so it goes right there. And how big is this lake? Well, we will do an AniLysis on like the forest and cover the size of this lake at some point, but it must be massive for this enormous ship to just settle right on the surface of this lake. It must just be a clear, like when I went to New Hampshire, they got all these lakes there, and it's just massive body of water. So I imagine that's what it's looking like. And the ship probably isn't as round as I put it there. It's probably a bit more shallow, because if it's coming here day by day, which but the plot makes it look as if it does, then it must be sucking up so much of the water. That water's going to disappear quite quickly, and somebody's going to notice that. So, yeah, I do wonder how much water they take in, because we will go into the plot, as I've said. The tank bit gets filled. It gets right to the top. So, let's keep that aside for now, and let's look at the plot, shall we? Let's look at what happens in Book 3 regarding the tank ship. It's Tobias who discovers the ship. How does he do it? I headed toward the tall buildings of downtown. Then I felt it. I don't know how to describe it. It was in the air above me, huge, vast, bigger than any jet. I looked up, but there was nothing there. And yet I felt it in my heart. I knew it was up there, coming toward me, but perhaps a mile higher than me. I focused all the power of my hawk's eyes on the sky. A ripple. That's what it was, a ripple. Like the ripple you make throwing a stone into a calm pond. The faint twilight stars flickered as it passed by. The sun's light bent, and for just a split second I was sure I could see something. But no, it was gone. If it had ever really been there. I tried to follow the hole in the sky, but it was moving too fast. I tried to see which way it was going, and where it had come from. It seemed to be moving away from the mountains and picking up speed, but I lost it over the suburbs as it accelerated away. He doesn't see the ship, he feels it. There's this, because it's invisible, it's cloaked. We discussed that earlier, and I should have discussed these things here, but whatever, it's ad lib. So he feels this ripple, and he sees like a little, it's definitely something there. He feels it, and his hawk senses help him. So he thinks, okay, it's sunset. We mentioned it there in that quote. It's sunset, so if I come back here again for another sunset, maybe this happens again. And it does. Then it occurred to me, whatever it was, maybe it only happened at certain times of day. It had been almost sunset when I'd felt its presence last. I decided to come back around sunset. So, what was I going to do with my day? I'd been floating up here in the high air, just below the clouds, for a couple of hours. It was time to give it up and try another time. I tilted my wings and adjusted my tail, turning toward Rachel's house. Maybe she would be hanging out around the house, bored. Then it happened. A mile or more above me, the ripple passed through the air. An emptiness. A hole where no hole could be. I reacted instantly. I had to get closer. I flapped till my chest and shoulders were sore, but it was moving too fast, and it was too high. It pulled away from me, a wave of air, a rippling of the fabric of the sky. It was moving in a different direction, though. It was moving toward the mountains. There were maybe a dozen of the big, determined geese, moving along at an amazing rate, powering their way through the air like they always do. The geese were aimed straight for the disturbance. Suddenly, the lead goose folded like it had been hit by a truck. Its wings collapsed, but it did not fall. The crippled goose slid through the air. It slid horizontally, rolling and flopping like it was passing over the top of a racing train. Most of the other geese suffered the same fate. One or two peeled away in time, but geese are not real agile. The invisible waves smacked into the flight, and the geese were crushed. They were rolling and sliding along some unseen but solid surface. And everywhere the geese hit, I could catch little glimpses of steel grey metal. The wave passed by. The geese fell in its wake, dead or crippled. It flew on, unconcerned. But then why would the Yerks care about a handful of geese? And that's what they were, I was certain. Yerks. What I had seen, or not quite seen, was a Yerk ship. Tobias is the only one to see this happen, but he goes and talks to the other animorphs about it, and there is some skepticism, but they eventually do decide to go with Tobias's instinct and do something about it. Let's have a look at the animals discussing this tank ship. We were always able to see Yerk ships, Rachel pointed out. We saw the bug fighters in the blade ship. Yeah, but every Yerk ship you've ever dealt with has either been on the ground or about to land, Jake said. Maybe the cloaking ability doesn't work when they get close to land. But if you think about it, Marco is right. They would have to be able to avoid being picked up by radar. Maybe they also have the ability to avoid being seen. It was a Yerk ship, I said flatly. How can you be so sure? Cassie asked. It just was, I said stubbornly. I just got this feeling from it. Also, it seemed huge, far bigger than even the biggest jet. This was huge, more like a real ship, you know, like an ocean liner. I want to find out what it's doing, I said. The first time, I had the feeling it was heading away from the mountains. The second time, it was doing just the opposite. It was flying too low to make it over the mountains, so I'm guessing it's doing something in the mountains. With their suspicions raised, the animals say, "Righty, Pip, we'll go find out exactly what's going on here, me old macker." So they head up as wolves to the mountains, to this park. Not this park, it's like a national foresty sort of thing. This big wilderness bit that's on whatever. I'll get more detail about what this place actually is when we come to its AniLysis, but right now we're focusing on the ship. So they go up to see it, and they see this operation unfolding. So Tobias said, "I'm sure it's heading towards the mountains because it was going too low to make it over the mountains, so it's going in there." The animals find it doing its thing in the mountains, and also there's a whole bunch of other stuff going on. We mentioned in a quote earlier, again something I should have drawn on here, you've got bug fighters flying around this thing, usually 2. So yeah, on each one of these we'll do 2. So here they're just sort of following. So it's usually got these 2 bug fighters following it around. It also gives off a lot of hot air, which I forgot to mention. I'm too ad-lib today, I'm so sorry. And it's also made of metal. Bing, 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 bing. Made of metal. "Hawk-Bajir?" Cassie asked shakily. "You're sure?" "Oh yeah," I said. "It's kind of hard to confuse them with anything else. The park rangers are clearing out the area around the lake. They hustled some campers out of there real fast, at gunpoint." Rachel asked, "This lake, it's in the same direction your big invisible ship was moving?" "It's a perfectly straight line," I said. "Wherever that ship was, I'd bet anything it was heading for that lake. And judging by the way you say these park ranger controllers and Hawk-Bajir are acting, it's on its way again," Marco said thoughtfully. "I'll tell you one thing," I said. "These guys all look like they've done this many times before. You know what I mean? Like this was a real common routine. They had it down." The huge main ship sank slowly down toward the surface of the lake. "Are you guys seeing this? It looks like it's going to land on the lake." "Are we seeing it? No. We've totally missed the fact that a spaceship the size of Delaware is hovering in midair." This ship, it arrives, it's headed towards the mountains, and it gets over this vast lake, and then it uncloaks. For whatever reason, maybe it has to move power from its cloaking ability in order to suck up all that water. You'd imagine, how would this work? So obviously it needs to create a vacuum. It needs to create a vacuum within this central tanker bit so this water can be sucked up inside. That's how it works. I get the feeling I know how this thing works. So these big vents on the side, maybe at first when it comes down it doesn't pick up oxygen, it doesn't pick up the air, it goes to the lake, and while it's at the lake it flushes oxygen out of these big fans on the side. It takes oxygen out of this central bit which sucks the water in, and then when it's full of water it closes that off, turns around, heads back in the same direction, and that's when it brings air in. That's when it can do that. Because when Tobias was on top of the ship earlier and he just said it was this flat moon-like surface where you couldn't see the edges, he described it as if it's very featureless. There's not really much on it. It's just a big metal blob, basically. So if it weren't for these big vents pushing out that air in order to suck up the water, then what is? Because there's no other like system there. There's no like exhaust or anything that we've seen elsewhere on the ship. And these fans look big enough that they can probably suck up water quite quickly if it forces air out of these bits here. So anyway, what I think is happening is it settles on this lake, it drops those little straws in, and the animals are seeing this. They're also seeing all these Hawk-Bajir flooding the place. By the way, the Hawk-Bajir and human controllers don't come out of the ship. There's a bunch of little trucks that come in, like wheeled vehicles, human vehicles that come up, and they come out of there. So they don't come out of the ship, which implies that even though it's a massive ship, there isn't much storage, like, there isn't much space for personnel. It's all in the bridge and it's just taxes. Nor are they dedicating enough bug fighters to do that. Which means this, obviously the security is quite makeshift. They're not putting too much attention to it, because if it was really that important, they'd probably send in troops via bug fighters rather than road vehicles, which, you know, if there's a road closure, what the hell are they going to do? If the road's blocked off for whatever reason. Unless they've got controllers in charge of this national foresty woodland area who says, right, no road closures anymore. No matter what happens. If a tree comes down, if there's a panda invasion or something, they take over all the roads. Nah, we keep it open. Anyway, I'm rambling again. This is probably the most rambly freaking AniLysis I've ever done. They see this whole operation go ahead. They see the straws drop into the water and suck up the water, and then it flies off again. And they come to the conclusion that this is indeed a tank ship. That's what they call it. I'd call it like a tanker ship, but you Americans are weird. Sorry. It then turns around and goes off again. Excellent. So the animals decide, this is actually something we can take advantage of, and they start to formulate plans. Rachel shrugged. We try and find a way to destroy the ship. Marco raised his hand like he was in class. How about if we go back to talking about birds? Rachel ignored him, as she usually did. Look, we find some way to destroy that ship and maybe the Yerks will run out of air and water. Maybe that will even mean that they'd have to give up and go home. Maybe, Cassie said. Or they may have a dozen more of those ships in different places all over the Earth. We don't know how many ships they have. This one would be all we need if... Marco began to say. Then I guess he realised he was about to suggest something dangerous. I mean, nothing. What? Jake asked him. What were you going to say? Marco looked trapped. He shrugged. Okay, look. What if that ship didn't get blown up or disintegrated or whatever? What if it was flying over the city and suddenly the cloaking device was turned off? This could be a big chance, Rachel said. Uncloak that ship so the whole world can see. I hate to ask this, Marco said with a groan. But how do you think you're going to do that? It was Jake who answered. We'll have to get inside that ship. He winked at Marco. Want to know how? Marco shook his head. Not really. Through the water pipes. As fish. Marco sighed. Jake, I just told you I didn't want to know. So this is the plan. It's a crap plan. They're gonna get inside this ship and magically know what to do in order to uncloak it and not get killed in the process. So that's the plan, apparently. Which, considering the design of the ship, probably not as bad a plan as I'm making out here. Because if they just get to they assume a grate is there, of course. They assume something is there, for whatever reason. If they just get out of that, and then move forward a bit, they're in the control room with just a few Taxons to deal with, and they'd have control of the ship. So, to be fair, things they didn't have Axe with them at the time to say, oh, I know how Yerk technology works, so it probably still wouldn't have worked. And yeah, but it's probably a good thing that they weren't successful in this mission, to a degree. Anyway, they go back to where this is going on, but in the meantime, Tobias decides to be a hero and save some bloke from a Hawk-Bajir controller who's running through the woodlands. Now, apparently, Visser 3 has figured this out, and the next time this big ship comes down, there's an extra couple of bug fighters that join in the fun. So we've now got four of these bug fighters come in, but also the blade ship comes in as well. It's like a battle axe, isn't it? That's a battle axe, apparently. From behind the truck ship came the usual guard of bug fighters. Only instead of 2 bug fighters, there were 4. The Yerks were definitely nervous this time. 2 of the bug fighters remained on patrol. The other 2 landed in the clearing beside the helicopters. Why? Why the extra security? Was it just because of the guy had helped escape? I felt something new in the air above the hovering truck ship. Another cloaked ship. Not as large, but from that emptiness in the sky I felt a dread that I'd felt before. The cloak shimmered out and the ship appeared. Black within black, an outthrust spear, razor-edged. I had seen the ship before. The Blade Ship. So because of Tobias's heroics, Visser 3 says, who's saving this random guy? It must be the Andalite bandits, who have foiled me twice already. I'm going to go down with the ship this time and, just keep an eye on what goes on. Make sure there's no Andalite activity. So Visser 3 comes along with his blade ship, just to see what happens. And then the controllers start tossing things up. And in one case in particular, the tanker ship gets a little hole in it. But it's only one Dracon beam fire, and apparently it doesn't do much damage, but here's clarification of that. Unfortunately for the Hawk-Bajir who had fired, the Dracon beam did not stop when it buzzed by me. No, the Dracon beam hit the underside of the vast truck ship. A small, neat, round hole appeared at the bottom of the ship. It was too small to amount to anything. That's pretty much inconsequential, as we'll find out soon. It doesn't really make a difference to anything that goes on, but apparently the Hawk-Bajir shot a little hole somewhere. No water came out, which makes me either think that it didn't hit the tank bit, or it hit the metal and just created a small little... What's the word I'm looking for? It didn't go through, it just went a certain distance and created a little crater. That's the word. Crater, Adam. Created a little crater in the metal side of this ship. But whatever. The animals proceed with this mission. As discussed, they go as fish and they get themselves sucked into the straws of this ship. And we never actually see the inside from Tobias's perspective, because obviously he's not in, but we hear about it from the animals' point of view. I seem to be in some kind of big tank. It's not very deep. At least not yet. It's filling up. With these lame fish eyes, I can't see beyond the surface of the water very well. But I think up in the ceiling there's an opening. Like a grate or something? Up on the ceiling? How are we going to get up there? Marco asked. Well, I think if they fill this whole tank, we'll be near the top eventually. We should be able to morph to human, let ourselves out, then morph into something more dangerous than our human bodies. Jake was the first one to go in and he described it there. So he's in this vast tank, but he thinks he sees a grate at the top, even though he says the fish eyes are particularly bad, which says something to me. This ship is massive, so it must be quite far up. So if he can, with bad eyes, see some form of grate, then it's not going to be a small grate. It's going to be a lot of grate there, which probably means it's what pulls the air out. So it probably leads to these big I can't get words today, can I? These air intake, outtake things on the wings probably actually lead to that grate as well, and then maybe it gets shut off to let the air in or something along those lines. But this grate that you can see with his fish eyes, even though they're rubbish, is probably quite sizable, which means that a lot of air can get taken out at any one time, which means the filling of the tank is quite fast. So yeah, it's probably quite big. But then, unfortunately for the animals, when they do eventually get to the top, they can't open it. Tobias, we're trapped. The tank is full, but the grate won't open. So now the animals, with the exception of Tobias, are trapped in this big tank. And I don't know why they thought they could just open this grate, but apparently they did. And it turns out that the grates on these things are actually quite sturdy. Fair enough. I mean, you'd hope so. You'd hope in this big spaceship, you can't just give something a yank and it just falls to pieces. That's not what you want in a spaceship, is it? Especially one where you're going out into space. You want it to be pretty secure. But the animals, obviously, their third mission in the series, they're very naive. They don't know these things. So they're trapped in there, Tobias is on the outside. And this is where things start to go a bit pear-shaped. And Visser 3 spots Tobias. And Tobias, his solution to not getting killed is to sit on top of this big metal beast. But of course the Yeerks have solutions to this problem as well. So let's look at that. My heart was in my throat. They were killing every bird they saw. The hawk, this was her territory. But then, behind me, a helicopter. Thwack, 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 thwack. Shoo! A Dracon beam. A near miss. I couldn't get away. Between the bug fighters and the helicopters, they were too numerous and too fast. But there was one place no one was going to risk firing a Dracon beam. Not after what Visser 3 had just done to the careless Hawkbajir. I let go of the air between my wings and dropped. Down, 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 toward the vast truck ship, spread below me like a steel meadow. In an instant they were all on me, but the angles were wrong. I was too close to the ship. They couldn't fire. Taxxons. They had come from inside the ship on Visser 3's orders. So somewhere on this ship, there is a hatch. Maybe around the bridge? So I'm thinking, oh, just where that little brown dot is by the... I don't know how I've managed to get a brown dot there. That little brown dot on the side of the bridge, on the side view, that's maybe a hatch where the Taxxons can come out onto the top surface, which, yeah, he describes it as a metal meadow, a steel meadow, so it's just featureless. But the Taxxons are now skittering onto the top of the ship to chase down Tobias. But Tobias has other ideas, and this is where we see the climax of this story and the eventual demise of the tank ship. I knew just where I wanted to go. Wingtips actually hitting the ship on each downstroke, I raced toward the ship's bridge, toward the tiny windows where I had seen the Taxxon crew. I could not save my friends, perhaps, but I could try to grant Rachel's last wish. I could try to bring this ship down. By the way, I'm not sure if I mentioned, and this video is getting very very directionless. I didn't know if I mentioned, but this is where we can definitely confirm that it was a Taxxon crew that Tobias saw in the ship. I'm really off form today, aren't I? But we'll crack on regardless, won't we, Lila? I reckon it's your fault. Your constant meowing has put me off. Isn't that right? But it's a Taxxon crew in there, and that's just double confirming it, just in case I already hadn't. Okay? It's from one of these Taxxon crew who had crawled out onto the ship that Tobias snatches a Dracon beam, and that's why he's now heading to the bridge of the ship. Take off! Move! Visser 3 commanded the crew of the truck ship. Almost immediately, the huge thing began to move forward. Very slowly at first, but as it moved, it created a headwind. The bridge was moving away from me. The ship was rising as it went. 100 feet up now. 200. Ahead of me, just a few feet away, I saw the bulge of the bridge. I gained a foot. Another. Another. I landed and folded my wings. I couldn't fly anymore, but I could still pull myself along with my talons, gripping the small edges and ridges that ran along the top of the ship's bridge. I was there. Below me, transparent plastic. I could see the crew on the bridge, Taxxons staring wildly up at me. With one desperate lunge, I propelled myself into the air. I had to fly full force to stay ahead of the onrushing windows of the bridge. Then, with one sharp talon, I pulled the trigger on the Dracon beam. Fry, you worms! There was no recoil, not like a regular gun at all. But a beam of intense red light lanced from me to the bridge. It burned a hole through the window, sliced through a fat Taxxon, and began slicing up control panels and instruments like a hot knife going through butter. I squeezed that trigger for as long as I could. This bit is a bit weird. So we're described as having little windows, which you'd assume on a bridge would be facing forward. And yet it's quite obvious by the description we just had that Tobias is looking down and the Taxxons are looking up. And yeah, he's firing down. So it makes me think that rather than going horizontal or relatively horizontally at a shallow gradient, in order to get away at the moment, the ship is going straight up rather than taking its usual easy path. It's deciding, right, we're going to get space as fast as we freaking can. So it's actually turning and like looking directly upwards. So yeah, like that, going up like that, which is why Tobias stands on top of this. By the way, it says plastic windows. So just to confirm that this thing has plastic-like windows, or at least something like plastic. And he's looking down. He's standing on top of these windows looking down, and he sees these Taxxons. And he flies up as fast as he can to get ahead of the ship even as it's moving, which it takes his full force to do, and he blasts through. So yeah, I'm thinking that it's at quite a steep angle as this is going on, because I don't think he'd be looking down. If these are really small windows, they'd be surely forward facing, which means the surface of the windows would be vertical. So why would Tobias be standing on top of them looking down? It implies that the surface of the windows is more facing upwards, facing, that direction, which would mean the ship with its small windows is probably at a steep angle as well. So that's probably what it's doing. It's going straight up rather than going at a steady gradient, like as it does going over the town. That's what I'm gathering from this. But anyway, this is where Tobias manages to defeat this ship. Let's watch it explode. Let's watch the animals fall out the ship. Let's watch all that fun, juicy action stuff. It was an incredible and terrible thing to see. The ship, big as a skyscraper, vast beyond belief, shuddered as though it had hit a speed bump. Still it rose, sharply upward into the sky, as if it were a whale breaching. It aimed for space, its natural home, but it was clear that it was no longer under control. It rolled suddenly onto its side. Boom! A ball of orange flame. The out-of-control ship had smashed recklessly into one of the helicopters. The chopper fell in ruins. A tear 100 feet long had been opened in the side of the truck ship. From the hole, the water of the lake gushed. It was a waterfall from the sky, millions of gallons hemorrhaging out. We were maybe 700 feet up over the forest now, when I saw them. Cassie first, then Rachel and Marco together, and Jake. They fell, fully human, from the torn side of the ship. In the sky overhead, the huge truck ship stopped climbing. It rolled again, onto its back this time, and plunged back to Earth. Boom! An explosion like a bomb going off. The truck ship had hit the ground. The concussion rolled us over like a tidal wave of air. The Yerk truck ship burned. What was left was eliminated by the Yerks. No evidence was left behind. No proof that we could show to the world. So that's where it goes boom and everything explodes. And with a ship as big as this, surely there'd be local tabloids in the morning saying, "Strange mysterious explosion happened. Questions asked. Answers provided." No. Because one thing I will say about the truck ship plotline is that it was dropped. There's no consequences to this, from what I remember, none at all. Which actually does imply a few things. But first, let's deal with a couple other bits. Yeah, I think the first quote there sort of confirmed what I said earlier about the ship being pointed at a steep angle. It says, like a whale breaching, which in my head is a picture of a whale going up like that. And what it does then, it rolls onto its side. So if it's going up like that, it sort of goes like that. And then it rolls onto its back, so it goes more like that. And then boom, it hits the ground. And from, nearly a mile? Or nearly a kilometre? I know you Americans don't do kilometres, silly buggers. But from a long way up, it goes boom into the ground and causes what would only be a massive, huge explosion and loss of habitat for this area. A ship that big, landing from that far up, would completely decimate the place. Would it not? Would it not just go bang, like a massive nuclear, well, not nuclear bomb, but a bomb of sorts going off in the middle of this forest? You know, there'd be forest fires, to eliminate all the trees. And Cassie doesn't say a word of this, of course. But there was really no consequences to any of this, which is what I'm going to go on to now. So what does that imply? So this ship that supplies the mothership with air and water, we never see another one of these again, but we also never see the consequences. Compare this to the Kandrona being destroyed in book 7. We saw the consequences of that for quite a few books, until that too became a dropped plotline. But nothing came of this. There was nothing after this where the Yerk's what are we going to do? They're all dying on the pole ship without water, so I'm having to send more people. No, there's nothing. Just nothing. Which implies to me that there were indeed, like Cassie said earlier, more of these ships. And they just said, right, okay, send it to some other place and just carry on. I'm imagining that's what happened. Because if it was their only one, then surely we'd be seeing more consequences of this, but we don't. So, and there was no mention of this massive explosion, like massive portion of the forest being wiped out. Yeah, it was just completely inconsequential, which is a shame, really. But I think we've got the design here. I think we've got it pretty accurate to what it's meant to be. It's big and metal, it's got plastic windows, but the surface is very barren. There's not much on the outside of this thing. It's just like a big metal balloon in the air, shaped like a manta ray. I think the air bits on the side are what firstly allow the water to be taken in, and then it gathers oxygen on the way back. And I think it is capable of going straight up towards space, but that's probably quite a dangerous maneuver. It's like a sort of last resort maneuver. And I think it's, with the ship as large as it is, it's safer for it to come in at a gradual angle and do it that way, which is probably why it did it, going in and out. That is the truck ship, or what I like to call the tanker ship, but because of what it's canonically called in this book, it is the truck ship, the Yerk truck ship. And it isn't the biggest ship in the fleet, I'm pretty certain, from what we hear later on in the book series. I believe the pool ship, or there's like a Nova class ship. But we will get onto the Yerk fleet at some point and go over like relative sizes and all that. Big, bulky ship, but there really isn't much to it. It's basically just Taxon personnel at the front here. Yeah, that's basically it. It's just a big tanker. Anyway, that is the Yerk tanker ship. If I've missed anything, please do let me know, and I will do an amendum. But apart from that, I think we're done. What's the next AniLysis going to be? We're going to be looking at Estrid, that quirky female Andalite from book 38. We're going to go do an AniLysis on her. So that's probably going to be one to look forward to, and I hope to see you for it. See you next time, everyone, from somewhere in the Animorphs universe. Ta-ra!